Now there are two of them.
Hello everyone and welcome back to part 2 of the
Hey,
Captain
buddy.
Cook's
Come on.
beer project. Now if you remember back to around Easter, I made this tea by boiling around 5 litres of water and adding to it an unmeasured portion of manuka and rimu branches in order to make the beer that Captain Cook first served to his crew way back in the 1800s when they arrived in New Zealand's Dusky Sound. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then check out part 1 because we're going to be moving at pace now onto how we will eventually be turning this liquid into rum.
You might be asking why I didn't just make rum, because you know I like making rum. It's got all the ingredients for rum in it, and it is something that I kind of planned on doing. In fact, so much so that I have been making a rum wash the entire time, which has been sitting behind me the whole way through this process. As I was making every bit of this, I was making that one as well.
In that previous video I used a pot of this tea to start a wort for beer, adding about 2 litres of molasses to make a total of 15 litres of wort, and at the same time I added another pot of this tea, straining out the manuka and rimu branches into 7 litres of molasses, and then topping that up in the fermenter to a total of 23 litres to ferment. This is a 100% molasses build rum, which is the first time I've ever done this. I also added to this some yeast nutrient in the form of some leftover yeast trub from a previous rum wash as well, which was boiled to denature it, and then I also added in 1 scoop of still spirits shelf nutrient as well, just to make sure that everything's healthy and fermenting happily. Lastly, once the wash had cooled to around 30 degrees Celsius, I added a pack of still spirits rum yeast, which I think is just glorified bread yeast if I'm honest. But I wrapped this up in a fermenting jacket and I put it on the warming pad and then I let it go. 2 days later and the ferment had begun foaming up from the higher amounts of molasses, which was not unexpected, so I just left it to finish foaming and wiped the mess up that it left afterwards. Then primary fermentation was done within about 5 days, but I ended up leaving it to sit for about 2 weeks before it was time to distill it. This was also my first time using an alembic dome and condenser arm, and I was excited to see what flavours would come through from this style of distilling. In the past I've only had a column still, which I'd remove all the saddles from if I wanted to do a pot distillation, but I think some of the flavours still were stripped away as the vapours went up this long column. For the first round I did a stripping rum, collecting everything in this 5 litre jug. The next morning I also made sure to capture some of the dunder, or leftover liquid, from the still for flavouring the final product. And then 3 days later I proceeded to the spirit run. I took some very wide cuts with this run, taking more care to cut when the tails started turning up. Once the ABV coming off the still went below 30%, I just started catching the distillate directly into my faints jug. I wasn't even going to bother with that stuff. I ended up with a little bit more rum than I initially anticipated, so I decided to bottle 2 700ml bottles of white rum, and I watered that down to 40% ABV. This would have been a lot closer to what Captain Cook's crew would have drank in this hypothetical situation of converting beer to rum in Dusky Sound, because they wouldn't have time to let it maturate in a cask. For the remaining 4 litres or so, we're going to flavour it by adding back some of the dunder from the spirit run and letting it sit on wood for a few months too. I added 100ml of dunder and 100ml of heads into a jar, and I'll let that chill for a few weeks in the fridge so that the alcohol will separate any particulates in the solution and trap it at the bottom. I'll then decant the essence from the top and then add back around 60ml back into the end product. This will add back some molasses flavours, and I'm hoping some of the rimu and manuka influences that were present in the beer as well. Anything left over in this essence jar goes straight into my faints jar, because it still has an alcohol content and I don't want to be wasteful. The wood I've chosen to age is a stave of manuka that was used in my manuka mead way back in 2022 I think it was, as well as a piece of black myri, which was later substituted for oak due to concerns around the spirit becoming too astringent. This stuff has a nice honeycomb flavour to it, but after a couple of months it can really ruin a drink, so I really only left it in there for about a month or so. It's now been 2 months of this Captain Cook's rum sitting at 40% in this jar, and it's gone so dark. It wasn't always, it took a long time for the colour to really come through in this, and that's because I used a manuka stave that I toasted from ages ago, and this piece of black myri, which I left in there for maybe 3 weeks or so, until I opened some rum that I had sitting on Black Myri for 6 months and found that it was very astringent, very unpleasant flavors had come through after a long amount of time. It kind of tasted like a tincture or like medicine, like a natural medicine. So I took that out and I replaced it with an oak chip, I think some pieces of ex-bourbon barrel just to help finish it off. And it's been sitting like that for another month or so. Now I think it's time that we bottle it up and take it out, because I want to move on to the next thing. So we'll have a little taste test of it, see how it went. Color-wise, it's pretty ambery. Again, trying to capture the essence of what Captain Cook would have made if he'd had a still on board and had not liked his beer. It may have turned out like this. That is good. I realised I was out of focus for that entire last part of the video. Cameraman's drunk. I'm the cameraman. So yeah, I think that turned out rather well. And the way I think of it, you know, if they'd made rum, it's a big if they'd had the tools to make rum when they were in New Zealand, as they were travelling back, they would have been dipping into this daily straight out of the cask on the ship and just trying it as it went. So this kind of feels like, this is kind of like what they get as they're coming around the tip of South Africa and coming back on the home stretch. You know, it would have been a very nice drop by then, and by the time they get home it would have been perfect. So I thought where we left the video was a little bit of a weird place where I'd made the rum, tasted it, and that was it. So I thought a fun thing to do would just be, now that I've got the silver rum and the dark, or this kind of golden rum, maybe we'll make some cocktails out of them and see how they go. First of all, we're going to start with some of the silver rum, and we're going to make a classic mojito plus a New Zealand twist mojito, which I haven't made mojitos since I was like 19, because I thought they sounded cool. So I'm just going to do a half strength one. I'm going to do 30 mils rather than 60 of the white rum, because it is only lunchtime here. Then I'm going to add instead of sugar, I'm just going to do a 1 ounce or 15 mils, if my measurements are right, of simple syrup rather than sugar. And then you can't have a mojito. What am I doing? I haven't even drunk yet. Can't have a mojito without mint. I have some spearmint from the garden, so just chuck that in glass number 1. And then the classic New Zealand cocktail, instead of mint, I always talk about how kawa leaves have that minty freshness. Maybe it's a bit of a planty smell. It has the kind of aerosol-y fresh impact of like when you've just brushed your teeth. So I'm just going to muddle both, even though there's no sugar. Nice aromatic. Same with the kawa, a bit of cross-contamination. And we're just going to top both of these bad boys up with a little bit of soda water and ice. If you're getting ice, you can be cold on it. And just do that to halfway. And to halfway. Alright. Leaving the mint in there for a garnish. That's good. Like I said, I haven't had one of these since I was about 19, 20 years old, when I thought that was the cool thing to do at a classy cocktail party. Very minty. Cuts through the alcohol flavour very well. It's a very mild. I watered this one down to 40%. That's almost all gone now. Shoot. Got one more bottle for later. But how does the kawa mojito stack up? I regret this now. It's not too bad. It is not too bad, to be fair. It's not as punchy in the face with the flavour. It's more of a mild undercurrent. I like it. I'd drink it. You know, if Captain Cook had made this rum in Dusky Sound back in the 1700s and he didn't have any mint leaves, he could have totally added kawa to his soda water and his rum and a little bit of sugar, and they could have had a little cocktail party there on the beach. Good lord. I liked it. Nice. Next up, we're going to do a classic daiquiri with my dark rum. Now I know daiquiris are supposed to be white rum traditionally. I like using dark rum, and it's more in line with grog, which is the distant relative of the daiquiri, when they were mixing rum together in Navy ships with water and a bit of citrus and giving it to the crew as part of their ration. It would have been sitting in casks for weeks to months, so it would have looked a little bit more like this. So we have to imagine that Captain Cook would have, if he'd been making rum and giving it to his crew, he might have doled it out this way as well. The way I make my daiquiris is, and again, I'm only going to do half strength because that those first two have already hit me. So I do 1 ounce of the rum, 1 ounce of a simple syrup. You can make that with a cup of sugar and a cup of water, boil it till all the sugar disappears, and then bottle it up. You can keep it in the fridge for months. And it's just sweet. It's just sweetness. And then I do 2/3 of an ounce of lime juice, which might be a bit too much, or not enough, depending on your preference. Play around, have a couple, see what you like. Shake it till it's all cold, and classic daiquiri. You can garnish it if you want with a lime wedge. Make it look a bit festive, a little bit pretty, and you're away laughing. Now that is a good sipper. Alright, the last one that I want to make. This is exciting because I've never had one before, but I've been enamored with them ever since that clip from Bad Lip Reading for the NFL.
Hey, I'd love to get you a Mai Tai. Yeah, come on, I'll make it myself. Is that a bother?
I want to make a Mai Tai, and it's perfect because it uses both the types of rums we've made. But I forget how it's made, so I have to go and check my ingredients list. 1 second. It is 1.5 ounces of white rum, which might be all of it. Adding to that is 1/2 ounce of, I can't get this wrong, cacao? I don't know how it's pronounced. It's an orange liqueur that's sometimes blue. So it's an orange flavored liqueur that looks blue, turns drinks blue. You can get it orange. For some reason the blue stuff is cheap and the orange stuff is more expensive. It's effectively triple sec. So I made some Contrail a few months ago. I'm going to just add 1/2 ounce of that. 1/2 ounce of lime juice, because it is a tiki drink. You can't have it without any lime for some reason. And then 1/2 ounce of this Orgeat almond syrup. It looks like cough medicine, very thick and white, and it smells a bit like cough medicine and Christmas. And then 3/4 ounce of our dark rum in there. Whew, that's a Mai Tai apparently. So let's give it a little shake. Is that it? Definitely make that as a double next time when I've got capacity for it. Bring all my garnishes up to the top, they're all under the ice. Garnished it with a little orange peel and a little lime slice. Mazel tov. That one's not as good. I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, the almond comes right out at you. I would probably have added a little bit of this guy. Just a bit more sweetener. The almond syrup doesn't have enough sweetness to kind of carry it over, you know? There we go. That's hit it. And maybe just one more dash. One more dash of it. Bit excited there. Perfect.
Since making this initial 100% molasses bill, I've made quite a few other rums with molasses as the primary sugar and no additional sugars as well. I've basically adapted the Buccaneer Bob's rum recipe, which I've used in a previous video, which I'll link here as well. But
I found that this particular drink, I don't know what it is, but it was just magic. I've got 1.5 bottles left, plus 1 bottle of the silver rum, and I'm just really reluctant to drink it. I don't know if I'm ever going to open the last one, and I'm sitting on the silver rum wondering if it ever gets any better. Something about the freshness of the manuka coming through, the bold flavors of the timber, the wood that I used in the maturation process, even though it was only for a couple of months. It's all just perfectly balanced, and I really love what has come of this. I might have to make another batch come Easter this year. But that's all for this video. I'm currently working on a couple more. I know this one was a little bit delayed in getting out, but that's just the nature of the game at the moment. So thank you for your patience, for sticking with me, and I hope to catch you all again really soon.